3, 2, 1, and we are we recording? I think we're recording. We're recording episode 616, Mr. Steve Mays, and back to what you. Well, I'll introduce you in a second, but back to what you're saying. You started as a chemistry major.
Yeah, I started as a chemistry major for no other reason than my SAT achievement scores were highest in chemistry as opposed to math. And then all it took was one semester of organic chemistry to convince me that that was not a wise choice.
That was my favorite class in college.
I liked it for about the first 6 weeks of the class, and then after that, it was great. Spending 5 hours a week in the lab every week and 3 hours a week in class was just killing me. And I said, no, I'm done with this. I'm going back to math.
I loved organic. I've talked about it before. I loved that class so much. It was, as I was just telling you before we start recording, I have to sink my teeth into something or my teeth get sunk into something else, and it's normally not beneficial. With organic chemistry, it was like you could always improve yourself just a little bit, and I could just sort of get lost in it. I would just memorize every equation, understand every possible outcome. I loved it.
Just to show you how geeky I am about that kind of stuff, I still remember what a boat and a gauche formation of an isotope or isomer is.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't handle all the laboratory work of all the synthesis and stuff. It was difficult.
I hated lab. I didn't like lab. Ironically enough, I didn't like any practical application of organic chemistry. I liked the pen on paper drawing the molecules and the structures. Actually going in a lab and boiling something and adding this and that, I didn't care about that. I loved the theory, and that was really it. Yeah, gauche and SN1 and SN2 and para, meta, ortho. Ironically, if I took a test right now, I'd probably get about a 2 percentile. But for everybody listening, please introduce yourself, man. I got you through Mr. John Rennie, who I've had on here twice, and who served on a nuclear submarine, and he recommended you to me.
Well, I've known John for a while now. I've been up to his factory in North Carolina to see what it's like, and I've talked with him on many occasions about other things associated with that. I've read his books, both of his books, and he's a tremendous guy, and he's done incredible work with his factory and his work in electronic equipment for power producers and things. So he's done some amazing stuff.
Yeah. And so, well, also you served on a nuclear submarine. That's the other little aside. I don't want to give all the credit to Mr. Rennie. You were also on a nuclear sub, which is badass. But so just to get right into your book and about the number 3 and the power of leadership, and I see it behind you, the drive despair out. I thought it was ironic that just this, and if you can't tell, this is kind of how I do the podcast. I just off the top of my head, but just this morning, like yesterday morning, I woke up, couldn't go back to sleep. I hate not having enough sleep. I'm a geek about sleep, and the whole day is kind of off, and the workout's never as good, and the podcasts aren't as quick and off the top of my head. And I woke up this morning and just couldn't go back to sleep. And I was like, here it goes again. Like, here we go again. Like, there's a difference between waking up and just being like, all right, close your eyes again. And sometimes I wake up and I just know that I'm up. And I was so angry, and I turned over to grab my phone. And as soon as I did that, pulled a muscle in my neck, and I couldn't move. And I was like, now I'm also not going to work. And I could already find myself just gritting my teeth. And I was like, excuse my French, I was like, this fucking day already. And I just stopped, and I was like, let's just not go into today with this mind already. Just put the fire out when it's just a couple twigs. And I was like, and I don't know why, I've never done this before. I probably should, but I was like, what am I grateful for today? Well, the first guest had canceled, and I was like, so I can get up 2 hours later. I was like, I drove out yesterday and got like prescriptions and groceries, and I cleaned my apartment. I was like, I normally do that on Sundays. I don't have to do that today. And I was like, number 3, I get to do a podcast for a living. It's November. I love the fall. I love when it's cold. And I just kind of laid there for a second, and I was like, everything's pretty cool. And kind of behind you, the drive despair out, it really was. I just get rid of despair and just go at it with love. Or as you talked about, the non-zero sum equation. Just go there. No, failure's not an option. Failure's not an outcome. And I was like, today, maybe I'm going to be tired, but it's still going to be awesome. And wouldn't you know it, out like a baby, slept for like another 3 hours. So kind of with that, can you explain to the people listening about drive despair out and just if you go into it with that, if you go into your day with your day is going to suck. But if you go in, as you say, with love, the day will flourish.
Yeah, drive despair out is one of the three portions of the little picture you see behind me, which is my leadership philosophy picture that takes all the stuff that I had in my book and wraps it up into one little picture. So the picture shows three things. It shows a foundation level, which is composed of honesty, courage, and talent. Then there's the challenges level, which is the things all the leaders have to deal with, which are missed expectations, ethical conflicts, and despair. And then the highest level is the achievement level, where I use the acronym AID, AID, assist, inspire, and depend. If those are the things you're doing and you're doing them well, you will be a good leader. If you're not doing them well, you will be less of a good leader. Mm-hmm. But the one I have in there in the middle, and I put it there intentionally, and I put it in there in big bold letters, is drive despair out. Because I always ask people, what's the opposite of love? And they always say, well, hate is the opposite of love. And I go, no, it's not. You know, love is an overwhelming emotion that compels you to act for the benefit of other people. Hate is also an overwhelming emotion that compels you to act. You just do it to the detriment of other people.
Yeah.
And so it's not an inverse. It's not the opposite. And I'm a mathematician, so I started thinking math-wise when I started thinking stuff. So I said, well, let's see. If I take the integers 2 and 3 and I add them, I get 5. If I take 2 and 3 and multiply them, I get 6. Does that make multiplication the opposite of addition because it comes up with a different result? No. What makes the opposite of addition is by doing something with 2 and 3 differently, an opposite of what you did with math or with addition, and that would be subtraction. So I said to myself, what is it that's the opposite of a powerful emotion that compels you to act towards others?
Apathy.
The opposite of a powerful emotion that compels you to act is either a powerful emotion that prevents you from acting, or just the lack of any compulsion to do anything. And I said, that's it. That's what it is. It's despair. And I went back and started looking at my own personal life and other things. And I said, when you're in despair, you can't lead anybody else. And when your people are in despair, they can't follow. So when you go and look back at a lot of problems that you see in life, in business and in leadership, despair is a major, major problem. And we don't seem to have much of a handle on it. We can sometimes talk about it as what's the word I'm looking for? The morale. Mm-hmm. Well, morale's kind of it, but it's really not. Despair is about being in a position where you just can't function anymore. I call it the shutdown button on your soul.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you don't do that, and you can't lead. And John Rennie, when I was on his podcast, the very first question he asked me about the paradigm I have here is, I notice you have despair, drive despair out in the middle. I've never seen anybody write that down before. And I go, I know. Isn't that funny? Everybody knows it, but just as they don't bother to say it.
Yeah. It's, so we were just, for everybody listening, sometimes I just can't get this microphone right. I'm going to break it off. But for everybody listening, so we were talking just beforehand, right? And I was telling you about how, as you so eloquently said, I have no clutch. Correct. For me, it's 100 million miles an hour in one direction. In high school, in middle school, I picked up a basketball in like 7th grade. All my friends have been playing since kindergarten, and I was terrible. And that's all I did, nonstop around the clock. And within 2 years, I was the best one on our little 8th grade team. I got to high school, decided I wanted to work out and put on some muscle. That's all I did, nonstop. Got to college, was a terrible student, woke up one day, first day of my sophomore year, day I turned 20, realized I wanted to be a doctor. That's all I did for the next 3 years. And I got into the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. 15,000 applied, 150 got in. Very proud of that. And talking about despair and depression, a couple months after I graduated in April 2014, my oldest brother committed suicide. And I kind of went off. I kind of stuck my head in the sand at first, just completely just numbed out. Was like, nah, that didn't happen. Just kind of, I was like, I'm at peace. He's at peace. And like a shockwave, it took like 9 months, and then it hit me like an atomic bomb shockwave, just disintegrated me. And, but I still kind of took the energy of what I am which is no clutch. And that's what I did. I started a charity. I wanted to raise money for mental health. I raised 15 single-handedly. Well, obviously everyone donated, but I built this charity, got it licensed as a 501(c) nonprofit, raised $15,000 in a year, brought awareness to it. I was talking to friends and family, having people tell me all the time, like, hey, thanks for like talking about this. I can open up about it now. Great. Awesome. Kind of did that and then took it to like the end of what I wanted it to be, donated the money, and then didn't know what to do. And after studying nonstop in college, it was like I never really partied, despite being at the University of Georgia, the number one party school. And then it was also
Miami's a pretty good party school too, by the way.
Miami was too. Yeah, no, if I ended up going to medical school, I would have partied there too.
Well, we didn't have very many parties at the Naval Academy, I promise you.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. But right after I graduated, before I lost my brother, I decided I didn't want to go to medical school. So there was this like midlife crisis of like, I don't know what I want to do. There was also this pent up, I didn't party when I should have. And then there was also like existential crisis, lost a sibling. So I did the charity, and then this all has a purpose, don't worry. And I took that, and then I just went in 1,000 miles an hour of like, I want to get as much of like pleasure and fun out of life as I can. So I went from like exercising and dieting and meditating to just McDonald's, drinking, pills, booze, smoking pot, everything I could get my hands on. Now, that was still like, hate is not the opposite of love. I wouldn't say that was the opposite of what I was doing. It was all one direction. Finally, and I've never experienced this before that or since then, but late summer 2016 is when I just stopped feeling anything. I didn't want to smoke more pot, and I didn't want to exercise more or get better grades or organic chemistry. I just felt nothing, not bad or good. And to me, that's when I moved home. I called my parents and said, I feel suicidal. I can't get out of bed. And moving moving home, it took a couple years to start, therapy and dieting. But when I started this podcast in 2019, I don't really categorize it any differently than waking up and smoking pot or waking up and studying organic chemistry. To me, I'm taking this thing and it's just all I do all day, every day, listening to audiobooks nonstop. And I know I'm talking and I'm not letting you get in here, and I will, but that is how I relate to what you're saying. It's not just a nice little poster board that you put on a motivational poster and drive despair out. Like, anyway, it's like, no, I know that directly, whether it's good or bad. If I was motivated to be a bank robber or a terrorist, I'd probably be the best one ever. And by that, I mean, I'd be the worst ever, but man, I'd be efficient versus doing there's a good soundbite. There's a good pot. Remember earlier when I told you, if you want me to take this episode down, stuff like that, versus doing a podcast or trying to get in a medical school or to work out. I have to put my mind towards something entirely. And man, I would take obsessively pursuing my own demise through drugs and alcohol. Ironically enough, I would take that over despair, because at least there's something. So, right. End rant.
You have a dopamine issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to pursue.
That's you have a high sensitivity to dopamine, and you crave it.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that drives people. But you're right, despair is that place where you can't do anything. Oh. And it came home to me. I didn't really know it at the time, but I experienced it when my first wife, when I was in the Navy, jabbed me in the ribs and handed me the phone and said, "Here, it's for you." It was 2:30 in the morning. And I picked up the phone, I said, "Hello." And then I got this kind of raspy voice on the other end, said, "Mr. Mays?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he told me who it was. And it was one of the guys who worked for me. I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he says, "I'm going to shoot my wife." Now, if you have trouble waking up after that, then you're not human. I mean, I jumped out of bed like a rocket, and I said, "You're going to do no such thing." And then now, the reason I put this thing about driving despair out to be in people's conscious thought in their leadership is that at that moment in time, if you have to go back to figure out whether the issue about how to treat despair was on page 235 or page 494 of your leadership book, you're already lost.
Yeah. Because
it's something you have to have internalized and ingrained. And at that moment, I knew that this guy was in a world of trouble. So I said, "Have you been drinking tonight?" He said, Yeah, a little bit. I said, all right, call a cab, get in the cab, go to the boat. If you can't afford it, you don't have money, I'll pay for it when you get there. Show up at the boat, go now, don't do anything else, just go to the boat. So then I got up, started putting on my uniform, called the chief petty officer, who was this man's uh, senior enlisted guy, and said, meet me at the boat, he's in trouble. So we came to the boat. We got there around 3:30 in the morning. We took him into the boat. We put him in his rack, closed the curtains, and told everybody to leave him alone. Don't anybody wake him up unless there's a fire. And so I said, don't wake him up for quarters in the morning, which was all hands event at 7 in the morning. Don't wake him up at all. Just leave him there. So after quarters was over, myself and my chief went down and got to his back bunk. We opened up his curtains. We got him out of bed. We got him fed. We got him some coffee into him. And then we started to talk about what had happened and what was going on, because he was in trouble and he needed help. And he called me because he was in despair and he didn't know what else to do. If you're a leader, you have to be able to not only recognize despair in the people who are your followers, you have to be able to recognize it in yourself. Because when you're in despair, you can't lead. And you have to be able to recognize that you have a problem and that you need help. And as you said, you know, you had this situation where this isn't working, I need help. You called for help. And that's the important thing, is that people need to understand that despair is the enemy of any kind of progress you're going to make in any way, in any shape, in any portion of your life. And you can go back in your life and probably find the moments you made some really poor decisions in your life, and you were probably in despair. You made that decision because, you know, this isn't working, that's not working, this, what the heck. And that's when those things happen. And it's a key element of the challenges that all leaders have to face in order to be better leaders.
That's an insanely powerful story, but yeah, I mean that's exactly right. Is I reached out and I remember, and kind of like him calling you, my parents had obviously known something was up for 2 years, right? Everyone's like, hey, this guy used to be in perfect shape and straight A's and now he's long hair and fat. Like, you know, not everything's good in paradise. And they had been trying to get me to move home. And I was, no, I got, you know, and they, you know, respect. They're like, all right. I knew that when I called them, I would imagine it was going through that guy's mind too. I knew there was no taking it back, right? You can't unring a bell. And I had
Right.
gotten close to that point before where I was like, I think I need to go home, but I never vocalized it, because then the next day I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, I was just drunk and emotional, like, you know, whatever. You put it back down, suppress it, right? That good mental health tactic, just suppress it, bottle it up. And I knew once I said that, though, right? It's like dialing 911. Can't call them right back. Maybe you could and say, I don't mean it. They're coming. So I remember I was like, when I say I need you to come get me, things will be put into motion that I can no longer. It's starting an avalanche, right? And
Right.
as soon as I made that, I mean, mom had a flight booked before the end of the phone call. And I remember when I hung up, I was like, shit, how did I do that? Something deep inside me knew, because if you didn't do it, you're probably going to shoot yourself tonight. And call my mom, and she came down and got me. And the next day, you know, I was still like, shit, should I? But it was still bad enough that I knew I had to go. And, you know, I had a girlfriend at the time and I lived on my own, or lived with her. And this was down in Georgia. They're up in Maryland. And I was like, I vividly remember my mom coming in and picking me up with my duffel bag. And I remember thinking, like, man, I hope this doesn't take more than like 3 or 4 weeks. Well, that was August 1st, 2016. I moved out on April 17th, 2021. And took a wee bit longer than I thought. But, you know, no girlfriend now. But hey, have lost a lot of the weight, still a little chubby, have a complete clamp on. I can enjoy a beer every once in a while, not go off the deep end. I live on my own. I know when to reach out when I need help. I'm not doing therapy anymore. But I would imagine, much like that guy, and there's a reason to this rant as well, much like that guy probably knew, you know, I don't know anything about you. I've read your book and I've been talking to you for 24 minutes, but I would imagine that guy probably knows something about you that if I had known you and worked for you, I'd probably know well, is that if I wake you up in the middle of the night and say, you know, I'm about to do this, to him, that was the dial 911. Well, shit, we can't undo it now. But now there's an important inverse to that, right? you can always tell people, make sure you call. There's an inverse. Like you said, if you're getting up and you're going, was it 292 or 494? You're already lost. You have to also be on the receiving side of it. And I have been on that receiving, and I look at it as an opportunity. I'm gracious for it. I had a friend who will remain unnamed back in like June of this year. This is a very introverted, shy guy. He's my best friend, known him for 20 plus years. And he called me one night and was like, yeah, or he texted me. He was like, what's up, dude? Can you chat? And I was like, I'm busy right now. And he was like, I just need someone to talk to. Him saying that is like Tom Brady coming out and going, football sucks. I was like, literally dropped what I was doing. I was like, what's up, buddy? Talk to me. And he was like, I'm just trying to get out of bed right now and really doing everything in my power to just not start drinking. And I was like, what's going on? It's been several months and I'll maintain his privacy. He is in a much better universe. Things are going much better and everything in his life is moving towards a better direction. And I think he knew, much like that guy knew, that once he called me, there was no undoing it. If he had hung up halfway through, I would have gotten a phone and gone and broke down his apartment door. I would have driven 4 hours and gone and find him. But could you speak more to that, what you as the leader do to when someone reaches out to you, what you have to do? And I think you already nailed it perfectly. You don't go, what's going on, buddy? Talk me through it. You go get a cab, get away, or physically remove them from the potential threat that they're going to enact. Get them away and do it now. We'll work on it in the morning. Could you go more into that?
Well, the biggest thing for me at that point was exactly that. I knew the guy was in a bad spot. And I knew that the longer he stayed in that spot, the more likely the things were going to turn irreversible and bad.
Yeah.
And so I felt like it was my obligation to him, as well as my obligation to myself and to the other crew members that would be affected by what happened with this guy, to get him out of that situation as fast as possible. And I also know that when something goes wrong, it's not the right time to apply corrective action unless it's a dire emergency that requires somebody's health and safety to be impacted. So I bit my tongue on some things I would have liked to have said to him at the time.
Yeah.
When those things come across after you make your initial things, your mind goes into crazy worlds about things you wish you'd have said that might have been clever, but been completely wrong to say.
Yeah.
But you can't, when something is going wrong, and most people will know when it's going wrong. That's not the right time to say, hey, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
The right time to say you're doing something wrong is after you've gotten them out of that situation and they're in a place where they can be safe and be able to hear the kinds of things that you're selling them so that you can help them be better the next time a situation comes up. That's the time to be doing corrective actions and things. Not, as soon as somebody does something wrong, go jump in their shit, pardon my French.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't get heard when you're doing that. They're in a different place. They can't hear it. And if they do hear it, they'll probably take it as an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And if they take it as an attack, they'll go into defense mode. And then you're back in the stonewalling and it's not working. So for some reason, I just knew that this guy was in trouble. I knew he needed help. And I knew the best thing for him to do would be to get away. And so I used whatever command authority in my voice that I had as a young junior officer to tell him, give him an order.
Yeah.
And I knew that from his training and other stuff, he'd been trained to follow orders.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that would be likely for him to take internally and do.
Yeah.
So I did that. And I'm just very glad because he turned out to be one of the best sailors I had working for me over the rest of the time I was his boss. He was a reliable person and a reliable sailor and a good guy, and still is to this day. And I'm very happy that things didn't go as south as they could have gone with him.
Yeah. And no, and you're absolutely right. It's there's a lot of things you want to say, right? I mean, if I can only imagine, if you came up on a drunk driver just wrapped around a tree, you wouldn't be like, don't you know that 35,000 people die no, you call 911, get them to the hospital. And once they're stabilized.
Like he would care at that point in time.
Yeah. And like you said, you couldn't even hear it. When
No.
people had told me, Tommy, you need help. One, it was like, it was like a distant echo. And two, when people did press it, it's a direct attack. Oh, you're trying to harm me. You're trying to take me out of my safe spot, my mental safe. It's and it's very frustrating as the person trying to help, because it's not something like brute force it. Hey, let's just nuke it. It's like, no, you have to go in like a surgeon or like a ninja. And it's like, it's much more of like an art, and you have to act immediately. And yes, you take the drunk driver wrapped around the telephone pole, you get them to the hospital, you stabilize them, you pump their stomach, and a couple days later, you don't come in the next day and go, here are your medical bills. Once everything's calmed down, then you go in and you're like, hey, there are some things that we need to talk about that, like, we're not leaving this room till we talk about. But you don't come in guns blazing, and it's so yeah, exactly. Yours is
Well,
brilliant.
there's a whole field of counseling and psychiatry about when the appropriate time to make an intervention is and how to do it when the person isn't asking for it. But this person was asking. He was saying,
Yes.
I'm in trouble. So
Yeah.
I didn't have to go through that filter of saying, well, what's the appropriate time to do an intervention and how should we do it? I knew at that point that he was in extremis, and I needed to take actions right then and there to help him get out of extremis.
Yeah.
So that was just what I did. And that it was something was important to me. And I realized later in life that sometimes the decisions that I made that turned out okay, and actually sometimes turned out really well. Sometimes I made those decisions because I was in despair over where I was. And so, I can't look back on those and go, what if forever? I just recognize that they're there, and that was one of the things that caused that. So I try to be cognizant of it as I go forward, making my other decisions later. Where if I get that feeling in my stomach again that says I got to make a decision here, I go, wait a minute, am I making this out of despair? Am I making this because I've thought this through and this is the right thing to do? But every leader has to be able to do that for themselves. And I think too many people, whether they're leaders or not, just kind of wander through life not considering that. And I think there was a great thing I learned later on that in ancient Jewish tradition, the start of the day was when your feet hit the floor, you clapped your hands and you said, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us be thankful and rejoice in it. And I'm like, that's the perfect way to start your day.
Hell yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's a tradition. It's kind of a rite. But that's the mindset you have to have every time you get up out of bed. And I find myself sometimes getting out of bed going, oh, hell, I had slept terrible. I had bad dreams. I don't want to do what I have to do today. And I go, wait a minute. Is that you talking or is that despair talking?
Yeah.
And you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to self-regulate that. But if you don't have the humility to do that self-examination, you won't do it. And you'll just go marching off and doing whatever you always do when you're in those situations. And it may or may not be good. But you have to have a certain level of self-reflection in order to be a good leader. Because if you don't, you will have a problem.
Yeah. And well, one thing I've been doing almost every day since 2008 is meditating. And it just, for me personally, just slows my mind down. Really helped me when I was studying. It's helped me with depression. It's helped me with all sorts of things. Really, it does help with despair. But I find like 20 to 25 minutes a day, just at least once a day, just meditate. And I have people have asked, what's the method? I have no idea. What I have learned through 13 years of trial and error is there is no method. Just sit down on a pillow and close your eyes, and something will happen, right? Just go into it. Give the old college try. And normally around the last 5 minutes, your mind, the way I describe it is it's like music playing on like a CD player. And when the music skips towards the end of meditation, the music are your thoughts, and the skips, they become longer and longer. And the skips turn into pauses. And what those pauses are brief moments of consciousness where there is no stream of thoughts. And I can't describe it because describing it requires words and a stream of consciousness. And it's that now we're going off into like the Bhagavad Gita and, samadhi and oneness and all that good stuff. But what I've also trained myself to do, and doing it for 13 years, is as soon as my meditation's over, as soon as I open my eyes and I decide, sometimes I open my eyes and I'm like, no, I'm not finished yet. Go back in. But when I do decide like I'm finished, I just have like a couple things I say to myself, and I won't go into those now, but they've changed throughout the years, whether they're goals or whether they're, but there are some unchanging ones, right? And it's like, I am so thankful to be alive today. Even if I'm hungover and I'm not feeling like it, I still say it to myself. I'm like, today is going to be great. My life is wonderful. If my life ends today, hey, I've had a great time. I've had a wonderful time. And there are some things that it does almost turn Pavlovian, where I finish a meditation, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, there's noise outside and there's construction, and the person above my apartment's running around, but I open my eyes and I'm like, let's go get it. Like, today's going to be awesome. And I just, even by saying it, you still sort of lean yourself into it, right? And you showed it with the guy that worked under you, right? You use something that he's been trained to follow orders subconsciously, right? So it was the first thing you weren't like, hey buddy, let's talk this out. You will do no such thing, command one, and you will go here. There's an order. I mean, it just goes down to like the reptilian brain. It's just like reflexive. You're like, okay, I'm going to this boat, right? By the time you got there, he's probably thinking like, the hell am I doing? I'm probably in a world of shit now. But like, right, you saved a life and potentially two lives. So that to me kind of, if we take this picture, we can kind of move into another aspect of your book I want to get into. And it's the analogy used, right? And I think Star Trek, and you're going to hate me because I don't watch Star Trek or Star Wars, right? But it's, for everybody listening,
Okay.
it's the idea that a friendly ship of your comrades drifted, something went wrong, they drifted into enemy territory. Now you either go save them. If you don't, they're going to be attacked and destroyed by the enemy. And if you go and save them, it's going to be viewed as an act of war, and it might turn into a global war or intergalactic war, right? But it wasn't about, it's a no-win situation. But the idea was you're judging their character. Mike Durant, the quote unquote Black Hawk Down pilot, I've had him on here twice. He talks about in his book, in the company, no, not in the company of heroes about Mogadishu, but rather Night Stalkers about the 160th SOAR. He talks about how one of the training things they did was they'd bring in like the new recruits, like the best of the best. They're like the Delta Force of like helicopter pilots. And they'd be like, all right, you're landing, you're right. They put him in a scenario, right? You just landed behind whatever enemy lines in Tanzania under the cover of night, classified, denied operations. All right. You sit down, your Delta operators get off, and like you're surveying the landscape. Okay, what do you see? You see 12 nuns standing in front of you. What do you do? What do you mean? What do I do? Well, do you mow them down with the machine guns? This is denied operations. You can't let anyone know that. Well, no, you got to let them live. You're going to let them live, or you're going to put the Delta Force guys in danger. There was no right answer. They're just judging your character. And they actually had a huge weed out process. Some of the guys were like, mow them down. And they were like, wrong answer. You can't kill civilians. But like, there are things like that to where you're just judging character. And I often look at it like there might not always be a positive outcome. And that's how I view life, is like, despite all of my best efforts and the things I want to do, right? My long-term goals, I want to make money off this podcast. And then I want to take a second shot at the charity. I want to raise even more money for mental health research. I do want to leave a positive impact on this world and make sure my brother's death wasn't in vain. But I think like, what if I do all of this and it takes 80 years, and then ultimately, like, after I die, there's like some World War III thermonuclear Armageddon, and it really was all for naught? Well, I don't care. Well, I do care. I don't want that to happen, but I don't care because I'm just going to go do what I know is right. And just like you said, like Kirk says, I take that. That's not an option. The idea of a no-win situation is not an option. I'm going to go get my guys and destroy the ships that attack them. And could we go into that a little more? That, which I don't think is necessarily separate from the beginning of the book. The beginning is laying the foundation to drive despair out, and then it's, well, now how do you put that into greater effect? What happens when you take that little idea, right? Equal and opposite reaction. It's one thing when it's protons and electrons. It's another thing when it's about like planets smashing into each other, but it's still the same thing, just scaled up. And I think that idea of, basically not negotiating with no-win situations and going, no, there is a winning situation. I think that is incredibly important.
Well, I think that's important too. I couch that in the book in terms of what I call the three probability rules for leaders. And the first rule number one is, anything that can happen will happen if you give it enough chances. Rule number two is that leaders can't change rule number one. Rule number three is leaders can change the scenarios. And that's what was the Kobayashi Maru test for the Starfleet Academy guys, was they were given this test of try to save the Kobayashi Maru and get everybody in Kobayashi Maru and your ship killed, or don't try to save them and then sit there and watch them die. And Kirk said, I don't like those two scenarios. So he went in and reprogrammed the computer to give him a fighting chance to possibly rescue the Kobayashi Maru and get out without having an intergalactic war. And he did that. And so his son, when he heard about the fact that he had, or rather one of his officers heard about he was the only one that successfully passed the Kobayashi Maru test, said, how did he do it? And somebody explained it to him. He goes, you cheated. He goes, no, I don't believe in the no-win scenario. So I create a scenario where a win was possible.
Yes.
And that's the kind of the mindset you have to try to have when you see things go wrong. There's another important part there too. And that is, I talk about it in the depend section of achievement. And that is, when you're the leader, you get credit when you're not the person who did most of the work. You also get blame when you're not the person who's responsible for why the work didn't get done. And it seems unfair, and it is unfair. But the problem we have to have is that we have too many leaders that think they only have to get the credit and they don't have to accept the blame or the fault. And the reality is, when you're in charge and you're the leader, you're responsible for everything good or bad that happens, whether or not you directly had anything to do with it or not. And if you're not prepared to accept that kind of no-win scenario, if you will, if you're not prepared to accept that, you need to get out of the leadership business, because you're going to mess it up.
Yeah.
And let me tell you the example I use. It's not in the book, but it's something I've developed since then. When a disaster occurs in something situation, a leader will come out and say the following: I'm the leader of this organization, and I'm responsible for this problem. And here's what we're going to do to fix it. That's what the leader says. But then there's a different kind of leader. And I refer to them as comma butt leaders. Now, the comma butt leader is the person who says, the comma butt leader is the person who says, I'm the person in charge and I'm responsible for this. And then they insert a comma, they add the word but, and then everything after that is why it's not their fault. And they throw everybody in the world under the bus, including grandma if necessary. Anything to deflect the blame from them.
That's the Deep South. Bless your heart.
Yeah, bless his heart.
But that bitch is fat and I hate her. And it's like, well, hold on. You can't just bless her heart. But yeah, sorry.
So you have too many comma butt leaders going around today, because here's the thing that happens. In addition to positions of leadership or authority, you have authority and you have responsibility. They go together. The problem that leaders have, too many of them have, is they like being in that position. They like getting the credit. So they think the best way to get the credit is to hold on to the authority, that nobody does anything unless they say okay. So what they do is they try to pass the responsibility down and hold the authority where they are. And that's exactly the opposite of what needs to happen, because problems don't normally occur at the leader's level. Problems normally occur at some follower's level. Something isn't working. Something isn't working right, or somebody isn't getting what they need. But that's not happening at the leader level. That's happening at the follower level. And if you don't have the authority to fix it at the follower level, you're likely to fail. And therefore, the leader's likely to fail. So by hoarding the authority, the leader is almost guaranteeing they're going to fail.
Yeah.
I kind of liken it to, I say authority is a lot like love. You get the most out of it when you give the most of it away.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're always going to be responsible. You can't get away from that one. If you want to be a leader and you don't want to be held responsible for things, you need to get out of the leadership business, because you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
But there's too many people who enjoy the perks of being the leader. They enjoy the acclaim and the accolade of being the person in charge of a successful accomplishment. And that's good. I mean, I like it. Most people I know like being praised for how something goes.
Sure.
But the flip side of that is that something goes to go right, you're also going to get blame. In America, we treat accountability as a 6-syllable synonym for blame. And it's really not. Accountability has its root word is count, where you count up the pluses and you count up the minuses, you draw a line at the bottom and you assess the overall significance, and then you do what you need to do in accordance with that. That's accountability. Michael Crichton said it best in his book Rising Sun. Did you ever see the movie Rising Sun?
Did not. No.
It was with Sean Connery and I've forgotten the name of the other gentleman. That doesn't come to me. Anyway, Sean Connery plays this old wizened guy who'd spent a lot of time in Japanese culture, and the other guy is a young, up-and-coming, hard-charging cop, and they're investigating a murder that occurred in a building owned by a Japanese company in the United States. And the hard-charging guy just wants to get in there and go kick ass and take names. And Sean Connery's trying to explain to him that's not the way it works in Japanese culture. If you want to work in that culture, you got to change the way you do things. So he says, this is a great analogy. He says, in Japan, when we have a problem, we fix the problem. In America, when we have a problem, we fix the blame. And that's a pretty good way to tell whether or not you have a leader who is a leader or is a comma butt leader. If they're looking for the blame, or they try to deflect the blame, you're in trouble with those people. But if they look to fix the problem, then that's who you want to have and be around. Because even if things go south and a problem occurs, if their dedication and their focus is on fixing the problem rather than fixing the blame, those are the people you want to work for.
Yeah.
Those are the people you want as your leaders.
Yeah. If you're the pilot of if you're in a 747 and like all 4 engines shut out, you don't want the pilot to go, who's the maintenance guy? You want to go, hey man, regardless of if it's the maintenance guy or whether it's a terrorist or manufacturing defect or your fault or somehow my fault for sitting here in the 7th row, the reality is we're in a fuel-soaked 747, 8 miles above the earth, going at 0.9 Mach. How are we going to land this thing, right?
Exactly.
You don't.
So that's the important part about being a leader. You have to recognize that you're responsible for the things that go on, even if you don't directly and personally cause them to go wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
but you are in charge of fixing whatever the problem is. There are too many leaders who want to hold the authority but delegate the responsibility, and that's absolutely the wrong thing to do.
I mean, this podcast is definitely a microcosm of leadership. I mean, for me at least, in terms of accountability, when it works, I mean, it's all me, baby. I'm like, hell yeah. Like I put in the work. I learned. I don't know anything about cameras and lights and microphone. I'm a biology major, but early on, as like the podcast was shitty. I mean, I was in this big room. It was echoey. I was on a laptop. The lighting was terrible. The webcam was terrible. All I did was swear nonstop. And, I'd look at it and I'd be like, well, I don't know anything about audio, video. And, that's just how I talk. And it's like, okay, sure. Whose responsibility is it if you want this thing to be? So finally it was like, I guess I'm going to just start watching like 8-hour videos on like how to set up audio video. And it's like, well, now you need money. If you want to get, soundproofing tiles or you want to get a good camera and microphone, well, go get a job. And well, if you want it better, then you're going to go get a job and you're going to think about how much you want a better camera and a better microphone. And if you don't want it that much, then that's fine, but it's no one's responsibility but your own. And I often have to always remind myself of like just one line. I remember hearing a comedian say it, but it stuck with me. And it's, no one's owed me it, or I'm owed nothing. And I always think about that. I'm owed nothing. Well, how come the podcast isn't big? I don't know. Figure it out. Well, guests say that I don't have enough episodes. We'll do more episodes. Now you can strike that off. You can go, hey, I've done 600 episodes. All right, cool, right? It's, well, I can't get guests on. I've had guests on who are in classified programs, and they're like, I can't talk about that. So what do I do now before I start recording? Hey, man, it's not live. I can edit out anything you want. If at any point in the future you want me to take it down, I'll take it down. Because of that, I've had on pilots who fly B-2 Spirits with nuclear weapons. I've had on guys on nuclear submarines. I've had on guys in nuclear silos, and I've had on guys from plants that assemble nuclear weapons. And I can only imagine I'm going to get no-knocked by the FBI any day now. Maybe I'm just getting a little too close by nuclear weapons, but that's not the point of it. And if I do, guess what? That's my responsibility. I couldn't stay away from nuclear weapons. I should have stuck with funny stories and comedians, but I just had to get close to thermonuclear triggering devices. Still, it's my responsibility. And that's kind of what the...
Yeah, that's true. It's an interesting... it's an interesting perspective. Nobody's great first time out the door. And here's my example, and this one's in the book, by the way. when Michael Jordan, the
Yeah.
greatest basketball player that ever played the game, tried out for his high school team and he was a freshman, he got cut. He was sent down to the JV because he wasn't good enough. Because I define talent in the book as three things: knowledge, skill, and perseverance. You have to know how to do something, then you have to be good at it, and then to make it really a talent, you have to spend a lot of time persevering through developing that talent.
Yeah.
Now, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team, as a varsity basketball team, as a freshman. He never let that happen to him again. There's an old joke that goes around in the basketball circles that says, do you know who the only person was that ever was able to stop Michael Jordan from scoring more than 20 points a game?
Michael Jordan.
Dean Smith.
Oh,
And the reason he didn't score more than 20 points a game for Dean Smith was simple. He also played that season with Brad Doherty and James Worthy. So there were other people getting the ball and making the baskets besides him.
oh, okay. All right.
So there was a reason for that. But again, when Michael Jordan came into the NBA, he was a slasher. He could get to the basket anytime he wanted to, but he didn't have a great outside shot. So what did he do? He spent a lot of time working on his outside shot and a lot of time working on his defense. And that's how he became the best basketball player of all time.
Yeah.
He wasn't that when he came to the Chicago Bulls, but he became that while he was there. And that's true of everybody. Nobody is perfect out of the box. Nobody's great out of the box. They have to learn to do it better. And the same thing is true of leadership. Nobody's a great leader out of the box. They have to learn to do it. They have to experience things, and they have to be able to learn from the experience in order to be able to be a better leader. That's why the second book we've talked about, which is I was a contributor to, called The Experience of Leadership, that just came out. I contributed a chapter 2, and John Rennie contributed a chapter 2. And it was put together by a classmate of mine, Fred Stuvak. Is a great book of giving young leaders insights into what great leaders from different perspectives and different backgrounds and different areas of expertise has for them to be able to be better leaders. Because my biggest thing is, when I wrote this book, I thought to myself, this stuff isn't all that complicated to think of.
No.
But why wasn't I told this stuff when I started out? How come I got thrown into the pool with the sharks and told swim if you want to live? Why couldn't somebody tell me how to avoid sharks before I got into the pool? So that's something I think we do a really, really bad job of, is teaching people to be leaders when they're young and developing, because we spend all of our time working on their talent. We spend all the time in high school and in college, and the first sets of things they do in their jobs, developing some skill or some ability to do something. But we don't teach them about leadership until later. And then it's awfully hard to transition from all of a sudden you're good at doing one thing, and now all you have to do, you're expected to go off and be good at doing a bunch of other things that may be completely unrelated to what you were doing first.
Yeah.
It's a silly thing. The example I give in the book, I talk about the foundation being honesty, courage, and talent. And I define honesty as seeing the world the way that it is, not the way you want it to be, not the way you think it should be, or not the way that it could be if those dummies in charge would just let you have your way. And courage is the ability to overcome fear, to do something for somebody else without regard to the cost to yourself. Now, the reason I point that out is everybody can remember what grades they got in college. You said you were a biology major, right?
Yes, sir.
So you had biology. You took organic chemistry, right? What'd you get in organic chemistry?
A.
Okay. What did you get in, I'm trying to think of another biology term, anatomy and physiology, if you took that? I'm sure you did in med school. Okay.
No, I didn't go to medical school. I got in. I decided not to.
Okay. But if you took anatomy and physiology, that's a tough course. If you take
College.
kinesiology, that's a tough course. So now the question I have for you is this: what did you get on your Honesty 101 final exam?
Well, there is no Honesty 101.
What did you get on your capstone project in Courage class?
I didn't take that.
Yeah. You know why? They didn't offer it.
Yeah.
So my point is, look at all the failures you've ever had in your life, either professionally or personally, and ask yourself this question: did I fail because I had a lack of talent? Or was my failure either in honesty or courage?
Hmm.
And I think if you do that, you will find you probably never had a single thing in your life where you had a major failure that was related to talent. So why are we surprised when we have leaders that fail catastrophically? The examples I used in the book were Richard Nixon resigned the presidency. Did he resign the presidency because he lacked talent? Did Bill Clinton lose his law license and the House and the Senate Republicans for the first time in 50 years because he lacked talent? Did David Petraeus have to resign from the CIA when it was discovered he was having an affair with his biographer? Did that happen to him because he lacked talent? So why are we spending all of this time on talent when the catastrophic failures of leadership almost always occur somewhere else?
In honesty. Yeah.
Honesty or courage? You know what the right thing to do is, but you don't have the courage to go do it because you're afraid of what would be the consequences to yourself. So those are the things that I'm concerned about. And I think we need to spend more time talking to young people and especially young leaders about what those things are and how those things will cause you to fail catastrophically so that you have a balance between working on your skills and talents along with your ability to see the world the way that it is and your ability to overcome fear and take action to benefit others without regard to the cost to yourself. If you do those things, your foundation will be strong. Then you will be able to handle the challenges and you'll be able to handle the achievements.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there is something interesting about leadership though, is that even if you never taught it, if you do the other things, take a skill, take a talent, perseverance, go at it, keep going at it, you will inevitably learn the same lessons, whether it's basketball or weightlifting or pre-med or podcasting. If you just keep driving at it and driving at it and driving at it, the laws themselves will almost start to reveal themselves, right? Like equal and opposite reactions. And this is just in my experience. Obviously, it's not objective, but I've found that there are little things where you just pre-med, right? I mean, I remember every once in a while you find a study mate and they'd be like, hey, I have the answers to the test. Like I got them. And I always, something deep inside of me just never took it because I was cocky. I was like, I can get an A without this shit. I don't need this. But two, I was like, if I get into this habit now, years down the road, if I'm a surgeon, eventually there's going to be a patient on the table and I'm not going to have the answers. And with this podcast, a huge thing I'm against is censorship. I have on people from all political beliefs, and when we talk about things, and even if I don't like it and I get red in the face, I still have them on here and we talk about it. When I've been permanently banned for YouTube, I interviewed the inventor of the mRNA vaccine, aka the COVID vaccine, Dr. Robert Malone, and I got a strike for talking about that. I had on a CIA veteran after the last election and talked about whether there was or was not fraud. Regardless, it was the discussion that I got a strike for. I had on Dr. Peter McCullough, the most published cardiologist in world history. He came on and he was like, hey, whether you want the vaccine or not get whatever. He was like, here are 4 vitamins that if you're in your older years or have comorbidities, you can take these for $7 a month and it'll greatly decrease mortality. Put that up there. And I got another strike and then I got permanently banned. But I remember knowing if I uploaded it that I was going to get banned eventually. And do I give a shit about COVID? And that's not to be apathetic. I know 700,000 people in the United States have died. No, I get that. That's not what I'm saying. Do I necessarily care about the election? Sure. Do I care if it was fair or not? Yeah, but sometimes your candidate wins, he doesn't, whatever. Life goes on. It's not that I deeply am dying on these hills of elections or of COVID or of talking about whether or not the moon is made of cheese. Or maybe one day you can't interview guys that worked on nuclear subs. This isn't a hill that I'm deeply going to die on. But what I don't like is censorship because I do read a lot of books. I have 1,000 audiobooks in my Audible library. And you can learn again and again and again and again all throughout history that censorship is always the beginning stages, just like a lump is the beginning of breast cancer. It always, eventually, not every time, censorship doesn't always lead to this, but every time genocide happens, at some point before that, it began with censorship. And whether you're lining up the Jews and shooting them and throwing them in tank ditches, or whether you're starving all of the farmers in the middle of China or the middle of Russia from some planned famine, it always starts with something. And people might go, you're being hyperbolic, you're pearl clutching, censorship, this. I get it. But one thing I do look at, and I know we got to wrap this one up, we're coming up on an hour. is I remember looking at it and I was like, one thing I do stand for is just speaking your mind. And sure, I'll get banned. And I got banned. And you know what? It sucks. I had 6,549 subscribers. Now I'm on alternative platforms with 1/100th of the users. And on that, I have 1/10 or 1/20th of the subscribers. It sucks. I mean, I've been doing this for 2 years. It sucks going from 6,549 subscribers down to 400. It's a huge, excuse my French, kick in the balls. But I know that I was honest with myself and I said, you know what? I don't like this. And whether or not I agree with them, here are the most published doctors in the world. And they're saying this is important that no one's talking about. And it's not some whack job. It's the guy who used to work for DARPA and developed the mRNA technology right after 9/11. And he came on and said this censorship is frightening. I don't care where people fall on either side of that issue. That's not the point. When a
Well, there's a
very
reason, there's a particular reason why the First Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees the right of freedom of speech, freedom of press, free assembly, and freedom of religion. There's a reason for that.
yes,
And that's why it was the first one. It's not a happy coincidence.
yeah. And the second one is an insurance policy. Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand that situation. And as far as the nuclear stuff, I used to drive my first wife crazy because she always wanted to know how fast the submarine would go and
The depth. Yeah.
how deep it would go and all that stuff. And I would just tell her, go read Jane's Fighting Ships.
Yeah.
Because but then when other people would ask me about what was going on, we kind of had this kind of a funny line we always used when people started asking us things. And it goes like this. This is, I can neither confirm nor deny that I was or was not there. And then when I was or was not there, I was or was not doing whatever it is I was or was not doing whenever it is I wasn't there.
Yeah. The Glomar response.
Yeah. So you learn that kind of stuff because it's important to do that. And I remember when I left the Navy, I had to go into a skiff and sign out for all the things I had personally seen or done. And promise not to go to 15 countries ever again in my life, and another 15 or so that if I went to, I had to notify the Department of Defense and the Department of State ahead of time, because that was the nature of my work.
Mm-hmm.
But I got one story to tell you quickly about that.
No, sure. Take your time. No, when I say you got to wrap it up, that's for you. I can go forever. I just want to give you. I like to go about an hour for the guest.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, when I was on the Los Angeles, it was the first ship of the new class of submarines. It was the Lamborghini of submarines at the time, and so Admiral Rickover, who was the head of the Nuclear Navy Propulsion Unit, invited President Carter and Mrs. Carter to come down to Florida and take a trip out to sea. So we took the president and the first lady out to sea one afternoon, and I was on watch in the engine room. I was the engineering officer to watch at the time, and the president and first lady came in, and we ran some drills for the president and first lady. And one of the things we did was an emergency ahead flank drill, which means there's a torpedo in the water and you want to go away as fast as you can. So we did all the things that we normally do for that, and we did that. And Mrs. Carter was standing there in the control room, which we call maneuvering on a ship, on a boat. And it's in a hot, sweaty, loud, noisy engine room with a bunch of panels and gauges that she knows nothing about, and everybody's all trying to impress her husband. So I got out of my chair, which was elevated, and gave her my chair so she could see better what was going on. And my engineer was standing next to me, and he goes, "What's with her?" I go, "I don't know." She was just like had this dour look on her face. And so we finished the head flank cavitate drill. And after we did that, my engineer says, "Watch this." And he leans over her shoulder, kind of like Snoopy when he's doing his vulture thing. He leans over her shoulder and he says, "Miss Carter, do you realize that you've just set the women's underwater speed record?" And she smiled. She just beamed because finally somebody had paid some attention to her. And for all this trouble that she was in, she was sitting in the chair, in the chair in charge in the maneuvering room when she set the women's underwater speed record. So that made her very happy. There was one person who was a civilian who knew how fast the Los Angeles could go, and that was Rosalind Carter.
And obviously I remember I asked Mr. Rennie, I was like, "What's the depth?" And he was like, I'll just say it's this. And I was like, you bastard.
But the official answer was always greater than 600 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
Greater
mean,
than 20 knots and greater than 600 feet.
yeah. I mean, I had on Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who piloted B-2 Spirits. I mean, he wrote a book, Stealth War All About China. And I mean, and I lasted until the last like 1 minute. And I was like, I finally cracked. I caved. I was like, how cool is it to fly a B-2? And he was like, it's awesome. And I was like, oh, you bastard. I know there's so many things I want to ask. And I mean, having on nuclear sub guys, it's, nuclear reactor guys, nuclear web guys that worked on, drones, the development of drones, the Reaper and the Predator. Oh, there's so many. I had on, I've been in touch with scientists from Los Alamos and Sandia and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And they're always like, yeah, we can talk about like historical things, kind of like the museum walkthrough, basically give me the history tour. And I'm like, I know. And when's the most recent thing we can talk about? They're like, we can talk about things up until like 1954. And I'm like, come on, you're killing me. Like, tell me about the space-based weapons. I want to know. What is that Area 51? And they're all like, nothing. It's just biplanes. And I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah.
Well, or the other answer is I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's fine. But I always think like, man, if I ever get some terminal disease, I just want to like, hopefully use this podcast and be like, please take me out to Area 51 or take me out to Skunk Works. Show me, you can kill me after. It's fine. I've got a terminal disease. Take me on to a nuclear sub. Show me the depth. And you guys just, jettison me. Let the ocean crush me. That's my hope, is like, just tell me something before I die. Just tell me something. And
it's not worth it. Trust me. It's not worth it. Really.
Yeah, I know.
It's the allure of the unknown.
Yeah. If I did know, yeah.
And I'll tell you an interesting side story on that.
Sure.
There was two side stories. One, there's a great book if you want to understand things about submarine operations called Blind Man's Bluff.
I've read it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's an incredible book.
It's an incredible book. And I've had some conversation with Sherry Sontag after she wrote the book and talked about some of the things were in the book. But anyway, there are some amazing things that went on. And I knew some sailors who were on some of the ships that were mentioned in the book. But one of the other interesting things was the reason that stuff is kept so tight is because it's amazing how simple little things once understood can lead to massive amounts of information that otherwise would be unretrievable. And that is, for example, in Blind Man Bluff, the gentleman who was the head of the Navy program that started up with Ivy Bells remembered that when he was a kid, he would used to go rafting on the Mississippi River near Memphis. And he said, you remember seeing signs on the side of the river that said, don't anchor your boat here because there are underwater phone cables. And he thought to himself, I wonder if there are underwater phone cables between Russian Navy bases and land. And so they sent a submarine in there, and the submarine looked around, and sure enough, found a sign that said underwater cables here.
Yeah.
And that's how they ended up tapping the underwater cables and the
unencrypted. Yeah.
And the operation eventually became known as Ivy Bells, and was sold out for about $45,000 by a guy who was sold it to the Russians, and we had been doing it for like 10 years before that happened. So there's a reason why people are reticent to say things, because they don't know what little piece of information can lead to big developments. The early on, when the Russians developed the MiG-25, the Foxbat, we couldn't figure out why it would go so fast, and why it was designed to go after our bomber fleet in a nuclear situation, as an interceptor. And we could see on radar how fast it would go, and we couldn't figure out why it went so fast. And then a naval attaché noticed that there was a place in Russia where they did metal recovery, scrap metal recovery. And he found out that when they had planes that crashed, they would take planes and to the metal works and rework them. And one of the things they developed out of that place was they did hangers, coat hangers. So he got a couple of coat hangers, brought them home. Somebody did metallurgical analysis on them, and they finally figured out that no, the Foxback did not have titanium wings. It had steel wings, and the reason it went so fast is because they put a monster couple of engines in it. But that's the kind of little tiny pieces of information that when they come to light in the right framework can really make a lot of difference in how intelligence is perceived and gathered. So that's the reason why people who have been read into those programs won't even talk to you about the names of the programs, because even the names of the programs are classified.
Yeah, right. I mean, the F-117 Nighthawk, when they were testing it on like U.S. Army radar operators, they lied to them, and they're like, it has a very classified radar jamming device in the nose, and they were like, oh man, it works. We can't see it. You don't tell them it has something to do with the actual like geometric fuselage, because just a tiny little thing, like all it takes is one guy, right? Who's that? Hansen, the guy that was busted in like the 90s. And when asked about why he was selling information to the KGB, just cash. All it takes is $45,000, and all of a sudden you're undoing billions of dollars of intelligence coups and R&D.
Well, there were two main spies back in that time frame. There was Felton, who gave up Ivy Bells, and there was
Ames?
Walker. Walker and his family were giving up security crypto gear stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a period where we had to dramatically change everything that was going on in terms of communication, because we didn't know to what extent the stuff he had given to the Russians was used. So they just basically scrapped and started everything all over again.
Yeah.
And so it's a tough thing when that happens, but that's one of the reasons it does.
Well, also, I would imagine as a, someone with zero experience in this, but I'll speculate wildly anyway, looking at like intelligence and compartmentalization, you also want to keep it quiet just so it keeps the other guy guessing.
Sure.
You know, maybe you bring me on to the Los Angeles and you guys bring me down there and I go, 602 feet? I mean, like, sure, it's impressive, but like, huh? Versus like, if I'm the other side, I'm like, is it 600? Is it 4,500? And you got to guess for all these contingencies. Meanwhile, you guys are like, dude, this thing can't go below 6. What are you talking about? Like, just it keeps the other guy guessing. And also, what was I going to say? It's also you don't want them to classify things in a predictable pattern. Because if you're like, all right, we found out that they could do this in 1950. We found out about the SR-71's first flight in 1964. And then we found out about and you start to class. Well, then you can start projecting. You can start going, so this is probably what's going on now. You want to throw them for a total loop. Make them have no idea.
It's a hard business, no matter how you slice it. It's a hard business trying to find out what people are doing. It's a hard business to try to make sure that people can't find out what you're doing. Yeah. That's been the game since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And although the technology's changed, the basic premises haven't.
Yeah. I mean, and there are some things where it's like, the information might not be, like NORAD. Like NORAD wasn't private. It wasn't classified from the get-go. People knew about it. But it was kind of like a flex. It was like, yeah, we're under 2,000 feet of granite. Detonate your nuke. I don't care. Right. That's something where you don't need to kind of be quiet. But other things like the F-117 or the B-2, which aren't supersonic, they don't have crazy defense mechanisms. They don't have air-to-air. Well, I think it came out recently that the F-117 actually could fire an air-to-air missile. But the point is a lot of these things are predicated upon no one knows about them. Like no one knows. I'm reading a book now and they talk about when the NSA would have like a prototype SAP program, special access program. Oftentimes they would just take people, they would just go check into a random hotel room because there was no predictive power for that. Everyone's like, are they at NORAD? Are they at Greenbrier? Are they at Fort Meade? No one was banking on you being at Motel 6. So there's also certain just kind of wing it, right? And then there's also the fear of maybe you'll end up like the Rosenthals. Maybe you'll end up cooking, so you get carrot on the stick, I guess. But yeah, man.
It's a strange world. It's been 40 some odd years since I've been into that world, but there's still things I I know, but I just don't talk about it.
Yeah, you just no, shut up. Keep your mouth shut. What are what are you getting from me? What are you? Well, I really want to tell Tommy for what? For I got to tell this kid in an apartment yelling at a camera. I got to tell him about the depth of the Los Angeles. No, 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 no. And
Well,
plus,
Los Angeles has no depth anymore. It's been scrapped.
well, regardless, you get what I'm saying. Making a fool of me. You understand it. But real quick,
Its depth is a few feet, and the reactor compartment depth is a few feet in the Washington State desert.
yeah, yeah, it's a few feet under some sand and some concrete. But we'll wrap this one up in a second. But I do just kind of, for one last time, I want to go back and do touch on the Captain Kirk and the reprogramming the computer. To me, there's something very important about that, and it's like, well, you cheated, and it's like, no, just like you said, to make something never happen, make it physically impossible to happen. Well, the inverse of that is, if it's still able to happen, then go do it. So if someone says you can't do this or you can't do that, that's not an option. Work around it any way you can. Work around it any way possible. We can't carry a bigger and bigger bomb. Well, maybe there's some escape clause, like, I don't know, collapsing a uranium core on itself. Like,
I've got a great story for that I can share with you.
all right.
When Los Angeles went to the Mediterranean for our first deployment, we had some equipment that was part of our atmosphere control equipment that failed because the fan belt between the motor and the turning gear, the fan belt died. And we were in La Maddalena, and we needed this equipment to work because we needed to control the atmosphere. And I didn't have a lot of faith in the way the bureaucratic parts and places and stuff in the supply system worked. So when we put in an emergency requisition to get fan belts so that we could have our machinery working again, I wasn't real confident that the supply system was going to pull through. So I had one of my petty officers, or two of my petty officers, take the old fan belts that had parted and fell apart, and they went over to Sardinia, and they went to a Fiat dealer, and they said, "Do you have any fan belts that are about this long and about this wide?" They said, "Sure, we got something so real close to that." I said, "Good." So we bought 4 of them, brought them back aboard the ship, and then right before we were ready to get underway, the captain has to sign a letter or a message to go out to the forces that says all of his gear is ready to go. He's ready to go to sea. And so, like the day before, he comes in to the wardroom meeting in the morning, and he says, "We still have this casualty report on our fan belts. Do we have the fan belts yet?" And I said, "You'll have to ask the supply officer, sir. I don't know. I haven't seen them." And so the supply officer starts sputtering. And for the next day and a half, he and the supply officer are running around all over the place trying to find out where our requests for fan belts are in the supply system, and they're just not getting anywhere to go. So on the day we're supposed to be able to get underway, the captain has to either get underway or he has to tell people why he can't. So I walk into his office with a message that says, canceling the casualty report. And he goes, "Oh, supply came through with the fan belts, right?" I go, "No." He says, "Well, then we can't sign this message out." I said, "Captain, all of my equipment is fully operational." He goes, "How's that?" And I said, "Don't ask any questions you don't want the answers to, Captain." So we signed the request. We sent the message. We put out to sea to go on our next part of our missions. And as we were driving down on the surface through the Straits of Messina between Italy and Sicily, the captain looks at me, he goes, "How did we send that casualty report again? How's that possible?" And I said, "Because the fan belts were put back on the equipment." He said, "But you said the supply officer didn't get you the fan belts." I said, "No, sir, he didn't." He said, "Well, how'd you get fan belts?" I said, "Because the day I ordered the fan belts from supply, I had 2 guys go over to the Fiat dealer in Sardinia and find fan belts that would fit, and I bought them." And he goes, "Oh." And I said, "That's why I didn't tell you where I got them from, sir."
Yeah.
And I says, "And by the way, I have 2 spares.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
case
Well,
they go bad."
well, but I think
So that was a case where I was in danger of the equipment that I was in charge of keeping the ship from going to sea and meeting its mission. And the process was supposed to be, you order your parts from supply, supply gives them to you, you fix your equipment. Well, that wasn't working. Well, that was not an acceptable answer to me.
Yeah.
So I found another way to get the equipment running.
Yeah.
And we got the equipment running, and it lasted the entire time for our rest of our deployment in the Mediterranean until we got back to the States. So we're underway and we're doing our mission, and the supply officer comes down to me and says, I understand you got a couple extra fan belts. I said, yes, I do. He says, well, give them to me, so I need to put them into the system. I said, no. He said, what do you mean? I said, because if I put them into the system, they will cancel the request for the ones I've already ordered, because we're only allowed to have 2. And I said, I'm not gonna take that risk. I want them to deliver the fan belts we're supposed to have, and then I'll have 4 extra fan belts,
Yeah.
just in case. And he said, well, I need to have them so I can put them in the system. I said, no. He said, well, I can get them from you. I said, no, you can't. And he said, well, I'll find out where you're keeping them. I said, you'll never find them. I know where they are, and my chief knows where they are, but nobody else on this ship knows where those fan belts are, and you're never going to find them. And so when you start giving me the supplies I need when I need them in order to take the ship to sea, maybe I'll think about it. And he kind of stormed out of my room, and that was the last I heard about it. But I wasn't willing. That was my personal decision. I wasn't willing to tolerate the no-win scenario, which was I had to go to my captain and say, I can't get underway and we can't perform our mission because I don't have my equipment ready. That was an unacceptable situation to me.
Yeah.
So I found a way to work around it.
Well, you heard it here first. Fiat fan belts helped Burr make sure that our thermonuclear weapons were on point when they needed to be. And that, I guess, is American ingenuity.
Well, I wasn't on a boomer, so I didn't have any thermonuclear weapons on the boomer.
Yeah, confirm nor deny. I don't want to hear it. You've already declared that I can't.
We were a fast attack submarine.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. None of this is true. Your name isn't even Steven. You can't confirm or deny anything. I can't trust you.
I can confirm that one.
Well, regardless, it's still insane. But I do like that. It's, it can't be done. Well, no, if it physically can be done, it can still be done. It might not fit within the parameters of the system that's been defined. Well, then let's bend the parameters. Let's not break any rules. Let's work around it. If it can't be done, I'll make it still be done. You can either afford sound tiles or you can't afford sound tiles. Or you can do what I did. And in the meantime, you get a bunch of moving blankets and hang them on like bureaus and tripods all around you. And you get halfway in between. It's not granted, it's not as it's not as critical as a nuclear submarine. But regardless, there are things where you can go, I don't accept that as an answer. And I'm just going to bend the will. As long as it's physically possible, I'm going to make it happen.
There's a saying in the services that goes something like this. It says, I will find a way or I will make one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the attitude you have to have if you're going to be in that profession. You find a way or you make one.
Yeah.
You have to have that mentality, and especially on a submarine, because the consequences of failure are so dire. You are at the mercy of elements that are awesome and unbelievably powerful every time you put that to sea and submerge.
Yeah.
I was the damage control assistant, and I was in charge of every hull penetration on the ship. Anything that went from inside the ship through the hull to the outside of the ship, I was in charge of making sure that stuff maintained its security and maintained its capability, because the consequences of it not doing that were just too dire to comprehend.
Yeah.
So there were times when I would be fretting about what was going on in different places and different times, and I knew I had to be able to be responsive to those threats and to those things, and I couldn't relax and I couldn't be complacent, because when you get complacent, that's when the bad things happen.
Yeah. Or the pilot Heather Penny on 9/11, right? She and the other pilot, they realized that they could go full supersonic and reach the aircraft in time, but they'd have no weapons because these things were being scrambled from a state of no weaponry. or
They're going to have to fly into them. Yeah.
or we could wait and load on some sidewinders. We will not catch up. And she says, or we can gun it, and if we see them, I'll nail the cockpit, you nail the tail, and we'll take this thing down. When the situation's dire, you go, hey, can it physically be done? The aircraft can physically move from here to here in that time. Game over. Let's do it. And
Well,
you need
that's called the rule of being in extremis. That's the Latin en, first word, and
EXTREMIS. Yeah.
In extremis. And in the Navy in particular, everybody who goes to sea and operates a ship knows about it being in extremis, because there are rules of the road, as they're referred to in the Navy, which says what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to engage other ships and other boats or whatever as you are navigating the seas to avoid collision and damage. But the one rule is that when you are in extremis, all the other rules go away and you take whatever actions are necessary to avoid the collision.
Yeah.
So while, for example, if you're traveling in a channel, the typical arrangement is ships traveling in opposite directions in a channel always pass port to port. In other words, you take them on your port side and they take you on their port side so that you don't hit. But if you get to the point where somebody is not doing it, you're trying to do a port side and the person is not cooperating, and the only option you have is to change course or run aground, you change course.
Yeah.
You do the kinds of things you have to do when you're in extremis. And that's the thing you have to be able to understand, is that you never know when the in extremis situation is going to be upon you, but you have to be ready to think about what kinds of situations might be there. So when something does come up, you have the ability to respond to it.
Yeah. The Secret Service members on 9/11, they went in and told Cheney it was time to go to the bunker. He said no, he was still operating. And finally, the head Secret Service guy said, Cheney's going in the bunker. And they picked him up by his belt loops. They said, Cheney says they used me as a battering ram. They picked me up by my belt loops and collars and tore me through the hallway. And he's like, oh, fine, I'll go. And they were like, shut up, Vice President. And they just ran with him. There are, or Todd Beamer, right? Sure, it's illegal to break into a cockpit. Well, hey, there's been 3 terrorist attacks today. Sometimes you storm the cockpit and you drive it into the ground. There is an extremis, right? And it's
right.
Sometimes you do that. An option would normally be, hey, talk it out or maybe get your life back on track. Sometimes you got to call your parents and go, I'm fucked. I need to come home. Or you call Mr. Mays and you go, I'm thinking about shooting my wife. Like, yeah, things are put in motion that you can't undo. But just like passing on port side, well, he's not letting me. Well, if the alternative is we're going to ram our submarine into the dirt or a cruise ship, you gotta bend it. You gotta make it happen. So I think that's a beautiful lesson. Let's wrap this one up. Mr. Mazo, I'd love to have you on again. That was a blast. Thanks for putting up with me. If you can't tell, I'm a little unhinged. I get a little excited, and I'm so happy you've read Blind Man's Bluff. I always try to talk about that with people. The little like crab-like machines they're putting out at the bottom at like 30,000 feet, trying to find stuff. I love that book so much. It's insane.
It's a great book. I really enjoyed it when I read it. I was impressed with how well they were able to research things and get together stuff. I knew that the stuff that was in there was not well known, but was no longer classified the way that it had been before. So, but it was interesting because I thought they did an excellent job of explaining the danger of submarine life, as well as the nature of the gambles that people were taking on behalf of the country, and the fact that unlike other people, they knew what was going on and they were getting recognition internally for what was going on, but it was a difficult job because you couldn't share it with anybody.
Yeah.
So if you were John Glenn and you flew around the world in a space capsule, everybody knew about it. Everybody thought you were great, but nobody up until that point in time knew who Whitey Mack was.
Yeah.
So the people who knew those kinds of things and did the kinds of things, and there were many, many more people in submarines that I knew and that I experienced with personally or just by word of mouth, that did amazing things that nobody ever knew about, and they still don't know about them today, other than the people who happened to be there at the time. But that was something that I enjoyed, that what she did. Sherry Sontag and Drew, I think was the other guy's name.
I recognize Sontag. I can't recall the second name.
But I was happy that they did it in a way that better portrayed what submariners were like and what they go through and the things that they did and how important it was to the country, because that was not something that was widely known by anybody. And it was nice to feel that the work you were doing, you knew it was worthwhile, but it was nice to understand that somebody else recognized it too.
Sure. It's I have on frequently a former Delta Force guy, and I've also had on, I talk about it, right, those drone pilots, and they all kind of talk about, they're like, within our group, like, we all know what we did, and they're like, that's not why you do it, but there is, I mean, there's a human aspect where you're like, I'd like to at least be recognized for what we did, right? It's not the same as you tackled the gunmen. Like, it's, sometimes it's, you're not John Glenn, you're not Neil Armstrong, it's what happened in the right? The CIA's, the wall of fallen officers, right? They served in silence, and a lot of what they do, it'll never be declassified. And but there is something, I mean, I can definitely, granted never served, but I can definitely imagine that, yeah, there's probably some sort of like, I mean, there's no denying it. It's a base human emotion. We did something great. We made sacrifices. It's all classified, and we're going to end up in the electric chair if we tell anybody. And we all know, but something, right? I had on 2 weeks ago John R. Halderman, who was a Marine who was at the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb test, working security. He couldn't tell his son until Bill Clinton declassified it or avoided the NDA. He finally told his son in like 99 when his son was 30. And he said it was like the greatest thing. He was like, I finally got to get, I had him on here and we talked about it for 2 hours. And he was so excited to talk about it because he had to keep his mouth shut for 50 years. And there is like a certain, we can all say, oh, that's my ego, I shouldn't, feed that. But it's also just, yeah, when you got to fart, you got to fart. When you got to sneeze, you got to sneeze. Something party is like, hey, I sacrificed a lot and I did something for this country. I don't think there's anything wrong with like feeling a little like, hey, at least in some inner circle somewhere it was recognized. I think that's completely human.
It's important. It's important to be recognized, and I think that's why the issue I'm driving despair out in the book. You know, and I talk about it in the section of achievement about inspire, that you want to inspire people to recognize that what the overall goal is a good goal and worthy of admiration, and that their contribution to it, even if it's not perfect, is contributing to what was going on. And there's a great song by Jimmy Buffett. I'm a Jimmy Buffett fan. It's called It's My Job. I don't know if you've ever heard the song.
Not that I know of.
He talks about how he was feeling kind of lonely and down, and a street sweeper comes by and he's whistling and singing and dancing as he's sweeping up the streets. And Jimmy Buffett asks him why. And he says, well, it's my job to be cleaning up the streets. And that's enough reason to go for me. It's my job to be better than the rest. And that makes the day for me.
Hell yeah.
And so the point of he goes through the song, he talks about a street sweeper. He talks about a guy who's a banker and a self-made millionaire. And so he talks about the different stations in life from low to high, and how in different ways they have a job. And even if people don't recognize it, they recognize that it's important to them. Yeah. And it's also important that other people recognize it too, because not only does it help them understand why what they're doing is important, but it also helps other people realize that what that other person is doing is important. So it grants them a level of esteem and prestige among other people, and that's a good thing to do for people, is to have not only the people in your organization appreciate them, but the people who are outside of your organization appreciate what they were doing when they were part of your organization. So I don't think you can do it enough, is to talk about the good things, and every time the bad things occur, instead of casting aspersions, you want to do is say, okay, this is what was not as good as it could have been, and here's how we can make it better.
Yeah.
If that's your attitude, then people aren't running around being scared to death of making a mistake.
Yeah.
Because one surefire way that most people try not to make a mistake is to not do anything.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest mistake of all.
Yeah.
Is
Right.
not doing anything. We used to say in the Navy that you make admiral as long as you don't fall on your sword. Well, of course, there's one surefire way not to fall on your sword, and that's to keep the sucker in the scabbard. But if you're going to be a naval officer, you're not going to be able to keep your sword in the scabbard.
Yeah. If you're going to be a leader, you got right. It's
If you're going to be a leader, you got to take that sucker out.
Yeah, that comes with it.
And so that's part and parcel of the deal. But it's important for individuals, for their self-esteem, to be recognized and have their work recognized, because it helps inspire them to want to do it. If they're doing it and it's hard and it's drudgery and nobody cares and nobody shows up and nobody makes it, then that's the time when despair starts to set in, because then they start to think, it doesn't matter whether I'm here or not. They'll just get another body to do this. It doesn't matter whether I do it well or don't do it well. That's when despair is creeping in, and that's when the leader has to say, no, I've got to go drive despair out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the problem is leaders get so wrapped up in so many other things that are being asked of them that taking the time to do that is hard for them to do.
Yeah.
Because you've got more hours in the day, more things to do in a day than you have hours in the day to do them. So you have to start picking the ones that are most important. And that's why I put these things down in this paradigm, and drive despair out was so important, because I think it's one that we miss. That's why we don't have as good leaders as we could have, because we don't train them on their foundation. We only train them on a part of their foundation. And we don't reward them when they do the right things, and we don't help them when they're doing things that are not the right way. Yeah. And that's the attitude you have to have.
Yeah. And I was gonna say the street sweeper thing is it makes me think of that Buddhist quote, right? Before enlightenment, it's not quite the same, kind of though. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. There's something about just going, this is what I do. And this is what I'm podcasting, and that's what I'm doing today. And I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. And, hopefully not get killed for asking too many questions about nuclear weapons,
Well, when you get a chance, when you get off here, Google "It's My Job" by Jimmy Buffett and read the words. I mean, it's a marvelous commentary on life.
Hell yeah. Well,
and I always tell people the best leadership book to read is Aesop's Fables.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the lessons can only repeat themselves in so many different forms, right?
Right. Grimm's fairy tales is also good. The Greek tragedies are also really good for that.
Yeah.
Because if you study Greek tragedies, you know that the major sin that caused the tragic occurrences to happen to the hero, the same sin occurred over and over again in all the Greek tragedies, and it was hubris, which was the heroes thought that they were better than the gods.
Yeah.
So the gods punished them for them.
Smited them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing you want to try to avoid. You want to try to avoid that, and you want to be able to give people a sense of meaning and fulfillment, no matter where they are in the station of life, because it doesn't cost you anything to recognize somebody else's worth. It doesn't cost you a penny.
Yeah.
But it's an investment that really provides huge returns.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Stephen Mays, author of Power of Three, Lessons in Leadership, which I'll put it in the description. It took me 42 minutes, so it's less than an hour read. No excuse not to get it. I'll put it in there. It's fantastic. It's easy to read. There's some beautiful lessons in there. And actually, you could read it in half the time it took for us to do this podcast. So, Mr. Stephen Mays, thank you so much for coming on here, sir. I will email you when the links, when it's up online and all the audio and all that good stuff. And I'd love to have you back on. We can chat some more sometime.
Love to.
Thank you so much for coming on here, sir. Thank you for your service. God bless America. Stay safe, everyone. And go get some fan bell.